Hello! We are going live today with Sarah from, now I forgot her handle. You'll see it in a moment. And she will be sharing about babies and sleep. I'm really excited for this, and I think it could be so helpful to many different parents. Shoot. Saying my connection isn't great. Okay, she is joining us. Thank you. Somebody said cute hair. I think so. Oh, I remember her handle. It's called A Little Sleep. Hi, E.T. So I'm going to wait for her to join again. Let me see. Maybe I'll invite her. Oh, it's freezing. Thanks. Is it still freezing up now? Okay, she isn't joining. Oops, okay. I'm wondering if I should restart the live so that when it saves, it won't have all this. But I think we're not going to. I think we're just going to leave it. Okay. So I invited Sarah again, and
Hey.
Ah!
Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
No, it's totally fine. I was like, should I just restart because we don't have it?
No, all good. I'm here. I don't know what happened, but I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, you can't see me in the frame.
Cool.
Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Thank you so much. Yes, I hear you.
Okay, good.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to hearing everything that you have to say.
Yes. Me too.
So do you want to introduce yourself and what you do?
Yes, so I'm Sarah. I am a pediatric sleep coach, baby sleep trainer, a newborn care specialist, and I'm here with Bleemy today. We're going to talk all about sleep training. And I know you guys have a lot of questions out there. We're going to hopefully go through some of the most popular questions that I know a lot of you moms and dads have when it comes to sleep training. And, you know, do we start anywhere? Should we just get to it? I know Bleemy probably has a bunch of questions for me as well, because it's a big topic to discuss. I know you guys are excited to hear about what we have to say.
Yeah, so I'm going to, I do have questions.
Sure.
So I wanted to start out by saying that everybody knows I'm like all into like responsive, respectful parenting, right? And so because of that, I think a lot of times people assume that I have like a very radical approach to sleep, which is like, you can't ever sleep train and don't even try. All you can do is just co-sleep and, you know, something like that. And really, it's that I'm just against non-responsiveness, you know, just like leaving a child to cry for hours or for a long time by themselves. And I think that not only is it not like responsive or respectful or, you know, great for attachment, I also believe it can it can be dangerous, I think, right? Because the only form of communication is crying when they're babies, when they're infants. And so it's you know, what are they communicating? Maybe it's important for us to know or to check. And so what I loved when I met you through Instagram was that you, like I said, you have so much honesty and integrity where you'll really share with parents what you believe is the upside or the downside to what you're sharing with them. And you'll try to guide them towards an approach that feels right for them and that still really cares for their needs and their baby's needs. Like, I think that sometimes with a like radical approach, sometimes we don't care enough about a mother's needs. And then I think what happens is, because we're not caring for our mother's needs, we jump to the other extreme. We're like, the mother is exhausted, she doesn't have sleep, she's just having a really hard time. And so we say, okay, fine, just sleep train, let the baby cry, go out of the house. Like, I know some people will tell me this, like their husbands will leave the house and let the baby cry and cry and cry. And I personally can't get behind that. Again, that's just me. And so I would love for you to share, because I know you work with parents to help them find something that works for them that is responsive.
Yes. There's a lot of factors to that. I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's the biggest encumbrance when it comes to sleep training is the crying. How do we get past it? How do you justify it? What's a normal amount of crying? Is it normal to cry at all? There's so many questions when it comes to crying. And the way I like to break it down just to start is to say that there's cry it out and then there's crying. And they're two completely different entities. Cry it out is a method. It's something that I don't really teach. It's, there's ways to go about it, but it's technically by definition, by, the Ferber method or whatever is extinction. Like you said, you leave the room 7 p.m. and you say, goodbye, I'll see you in the morning. And then there's crying. Crying is a feeling, it's an expression. I'm sure you have a lot to say about this in your profession and with all the parents that you work with. And it's really important to know how to differentiate the two because somehow sleep training got this rap that it's just this neglectful, unresponsive thing or approach or method that you go about with just crying, and crying became this thing that was just that people couldn't differentiate between. So crying is an expression. It is your baby's way of communicating, like you said. And it's usually, in this case, I would say they're crying out of frustration. And that being said, there are so many factors that come into play when we start sleep training. We make sure that we have our baby's needs met, right? Because if we don't do that, if we don't factor in what they ate and what their personality is like and how they slept that day, their age, the parents' philosophy and their parenting philosophy, when we don't take those things into consideration and we don't have our baby's needs met, then yes, the crying could mean a lot more than frustration. That can hinder the parent-child attachment, which I know is another question and topic for a little bit later if we have time. But I think that being said, when we're able to learn what our baby's cry is, we can really work with it. And that being said, again, it's something that we want to help them through, which again is your forte, is helping parents cope with their children, their children's feelings, how to get their needs met and all that stuff. And I think you would agree that frustration is a really big feeling, and frustration when in the context of sleep training is something that we don't want to kind of take it away from them. We want to help them through it. And the way to do that is by responsive parenting and responsive sleep training. So we're not saying like, oh, deal with it and we'll see you in the morning, right? Because we have to teach them how to deal with it. We have to support them through it. We don't want to take it away from them, right? Frustration is a feeling that I don't think it's too early to start supporting their feelings. I think that you can start at any age. And we want to help them through that. So that's one way to look at sleep training, is by helping them through this feeling that they are not so familiar with yet. And we're there to tell them that we're not going to neglect them, but we're also not going to, we don't want to save them. We don't want to take away their experience with this feeling, because at some point they are going to have to learn to deal with minimal stress, frustration, whatever it is. And I think that, again, we need to be there to help them through it. And I don't know if anybody here that I've worked with is on this live, but I have plenty of parents who can attest to the fact that we do a no cry sleep training approach, which leads me to my next thought. And then I definitely want to hear if you have any questions, but there is always going to be some crying when you are teaching your child a new skill. Even as adults, some adults cry. That's their way of dealing with stress or frustration or big changes, is we cry, and I think that it's really important to remember that this is really normal, So anyway, I can go on and on, but I want to open up the floor to you if you have any questions about it.
Yeah, so and this is the first time I'm hearing it as frustration,
Yeah.
I actually hear that a lot from Dr. Gordon Newfield when he talks about like kids and experiencing things that are not going according to the way they want to or not working for them. Yeah. And they experience frustration and how good it is for them to, work through that frustration and then get to the other side where they meet acceptance. Yeah. And no, this is the first time I'm hearing it in relation to babies and sleep. And so what you're saying is, if the crying isn't coming from a place of like having a need that's being met, they could be feeling frustrated because they want their parent to be there, or they have a specific way that they want to be falling asleep. Yes. Or is that what you're saying?
Yes. Thank you for asking that. So just to clarify, they're frustrated, thank you, because they don't know how to fall asleep. And I do believe that it is a skill we need to teach them for so many different reasons, right? Nowadays, I feel like you know, sleep has become this concept of that it's a luxury, and it's a necessity. It's something that we need. And I think that the earlier we teach our babies to fall asleep, the better they'll sleep, you know, in the long run, and the better we're going to sleep, you know, happy baby, happy parents, and vice versa. So it's definitely one thing that leads to the next, and they both go hand in hand. So yes, they're frustrated because they don't have that skill yet of falling asleep independently and cry, because it's a skill they need to learn. For me, I like to compare it to really any skill that your child is going to learn, whether it's, you know, learning to do homework at a certain age or learning to ride a bike. You know, there's certain ways to approach it. If your child falls off the bike, are we going to stand there and say, deal with it, you'll be fine? Or are we going to tell them like, oh, it's normal to fall and then get back up again, but I'm here to help you. Let me take your hand. Let me help you get back on the bike until you're able to teach your child how to ride a bike. And I think really the same thing goes for sleep training. You can be there to support your child. You know, you can empathize with them, tell them, even if they're really little and you think they don't understand, tell them like, I know you're frustrated. I know you've never learned how to fall asleep on your own. I know it's a skill, it's a new change, it's a new change in your routine or whatever it is, but I'm here to help you and support you. You can hold your baby's hand, you can sit by the crib, you can sing them a song, whatever it is that you and your baby like to do together. That's your own thing, whatever you do in your house. But you can be there every step of the way. And I like to say it as there's going to be crying, but you're not leaving them to figure it out on their own and just deal with it. You're helping them cope with that stress and to cope with that feeling. And I think that's really important for parents to know, because there's going to be crying during sleep training. It's inevitable. There's no way around it, you know. But I always tell parents, it's what we do with the crying. What are we going to do with it? How are we going to approach it? How are we going to adopt the crying in our parenting? And what does that look like? And it can look differently for every family. So.
Right. Okay. Well, I have so many questions, but first I wanted to, So first I wanted to say something else that was really interesting that you just pointed out. You said you believe that falling asleep on your own is a skill. So I've always heard that sleeping is not a skill. It's biological. Like we all were born to sleep, but you're making a very interesting distinction here. You're saying falling asleep on your own, maybe that could be a skill. And some parents are more okay with like helping their child fall asleep until eventually they get old enough to develop that, I don't know, somehow they, I guess, I don't know, develop that skill or what. And some parents are like, no, I need to do it sooner because I can't do it. It's not working for me. And then the other point that I'm hearing is that you're saying that a baby will cry, but it's not that you're leaving them alone when they cry. By the way, I've heard this before from even people who don't believe in sleep training at all, where they'll say like, it's fine if your baby cries as long as you're there.
Yes. They're gonna cry. Like I think so. You tell me. You're the parenting guru, so you tell me what you think about.
Well, yeah, I mean, my whole belief system is kind of that it's okay for our children to feel distressing, uncomfortable feelings, and it's not our job to save or rescue them from it, but to support them through it, right? Unless, of course, it's the problem with with older children, when they're crying, it's because there's a feeling, right? And so we support them through it. But with a baby, that's our way of primary way of communicating. So it could be communicating a need, which that's another piece also that we have to attend to. Meaning we can't just be like, oh, let's say a child's crying because they're hungry and just be like, I'm going to support you through your feeling. Right. Of course, we have to feed them. Right. Exactly. Or they're, or let's say their diaper needs to be changed and they're uncomfortable. We're not going to be like, oh, I'm just going to support you. So that's where it gets a little tricky with babies. What is it communicating? Have I met the need? But like you're saying, when it's just frustration because it's like, oh, I want the support to fall asleep, but I'm not receiving it. And it's distressing to me. Then you can support them through it and be like, I'm here through this stress. Like this, exactly. And I think it's totally fine for people to experience, children will experience stress, like you said, distress, when they're learning a new skill. The question is, and this is, I think, where like, I don't love the like just letting them cry it out, is that if it's too distressing, that's an issue, right? Like if let's say, right, like a child, if you're asking them to do a skill that's like way beyond their, what they're capable of doing, you just like shove them into it, then that's too distressing. But what I love about what I'm hearing from you is that you do it slowly and, meeting the child where they're at. So it's that you're not just like throwing them into it, and also with the support. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. What was I going to say? Yes, I think that as long as you have their needs met beforehand, right? So, and as much as we humanly possibly can have their needs met, give them that extra love and attention. You make sure they're well fed. Everybody who knows me knows I'm very big on feedings and feeding schedules and making sure your babies are well fed before they go to sleep, whether newborn, infant, toddler. It's really important that they eat well and they eat, you know, enough to be able to fall asleep and stay asleep. So your question about the frustration, what was your question again? Just remind me. I know you said something about like the frustration and like having them, supporting them on their own basically, and it being a skill.
Yeah. No, I don't know if did I have a question? I don't know. I was basically, no, it's totally fine. I was just making sure I understood what it was that you were saying. And just taking it, and because this is the first time I'm hearing some of these things, you know, so I'm just trying to reformulate it for myself, kind of, and I make sure I understand. No, it's totally fine, and understand where you're coming from. But I did think you wanted to mention something while I was saying it, and I don't remember what that point was.
Mommy brain.
Yeah,
and I'm sure so.
I'm sure we'll come back.
Yeah.
So okay, so the idea is that you're saying there will be crying, but it's that we meet their needs.
Yes.
Beforehand, so we know that it's not that they're communicating a need. And then you're also not leaving them alone when they're crying, and you're also doing it in, I guess, small increments or something like that, right?
So that's what I remember I wanted to say, is that when this is really important because I deal with this with a lot of parents. So you mentioned about what's too much stress or too much crying and too much distress. I just remembered, sorry. So basically, yes, when someone comes to me, whether we're working together or it's before we're working together, and I'm hearing about the scenario that we potentially are going to be fixing, and parents tell me that my baby's screaming for hours on end, or even during a method, if I give somebody a plan and they're following it, and baby is just screaming and screaming and screaming, I always tell them, like, that's a red flag. There should not be so much crying. I really don't believe so. And I really truly find, you know, in my own experience, whether with my kids or people that I've worked with, that there really isn't as much crying as parents anticipate, as long as you do it right. And you know, that brings me to another point later, like, is sleep training selfish, right? And we'll get to that later. But as long as you do it right and you stick to the plan, you have all their needs met, which I know I keep saying, but it's so important: love, food, comfortable temperature, clean diaper, whatever else you think they need. There should not be so much crying, you know, even for parents who decide they want to go the route of doing some sort of cry it out method where they leave the room and they come back in at some point. There shouldn't be so much crying. It should not be. And if there is, we need to reevaluate and see what's going on, right? What need do they not have met that they're crying so much? So that's a really big deal for me.
Wow, I really appreciate that. I actually tried to sleep train my oldest for like maybe like 2 days. She screamed the entire time and would not let up, and I was like, wait just another 5 minutes, maybe she'll stop. Wait just another 5 minutes, and she just would not stop. And so then I gave up on it. But when she was a year old, I finally did, you know, we used to rock her to sleep every night. I finally did just put her in a crib, and I stayed in the room. I made sure to stay in the room, but without, like, just was there. She did cry, but literally just for a minute, and then fell asleep.
Good.
Yeah, so it's so interesting because I was going to ask you, like, is there an age factor here, or like, I'm so curious about that.
It's an age factor for starting sleep training or for actually sitting in the room?
No, for starting sleep training, like, because I see when she was younger, it was again, maybe I didn't do it I obviously did like a cry it out sort of approach, which I was like, I didn't know anything else.
Interestingly, a cry it out approach works faster for younger babies. Not that I would tell moms to just, you know, shut the door and not go back in. I think it's irresponsible, and it's sometimes mean, you know, especially depending on the baby and whatever. But yeah, they do, you can start sleep training from about 4 months and on. With the newborns that I work with, when we start from day one, we can really do sleep training if we need to by 3 months, given that the baby has gained a half a pound a week, they're growing nicely, they're on, you know, they're doing what they need to be growing developmentally, all that stuff. You can really start at 3 months, and the reason is because they're much more prepared than a baby who just shows up at 4 months, who has zero skill at all and is like, hey, I'm ready to sleep train. So I say 3 to 4 months. Usually the average age is about 4 months. And yes, you can start sleep training then, for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is that I love that you mentioned about like making sure they're gaining weight and all that, because
Yeah.
I actually have friends who did sleep train their kids when they were very young, like maybe 2 weeks old,
Oh.
and the baby, yeah, and there was like they were malnourished. They
Ooh, that's
literally,
not good. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I remember thinking like, wow, that's not great.
Yeah, yeah. So with newborns, I don't do like formal sleep training. I really just start, it's really just about creating good habits from the beginning. And I always take into account their weight gain, how they are doing in general. And it's making slow changes. It's not when someone comes to me and is like, hey, I want my 3-week-old sleeping at night, let's skip the feedings. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to lay the groundwork for good habits. We can try and stretch your baby's sleep a little bit, but we're not looking to get rid of nighttime feedings. We're not looking to do any of that. So I always make sure I'm very clear about what it is we're doing with the newborns before. And I also want to clarify, like, you don't do that with a newborn. It's not age appropriate developmentally, and it's not nice. They need a lot when they're newborns, which we all know if you have little ones.
I love that you're saying that, because I think sometimes that's what people do. I know I
Yeah.
told you people did do that, and again, I'm not like blaming them. I think that that's what they read from like the books that they had, and about like sleep training. But that's what I love about you, is that like you take into consideration how children are, and that they're supposed to be feeding at night. That
Yeah, no, they are.
Yeah, and it's not just like we're going to get rid of that.
Sugar. Sorry, go ahead.
But did you say the what? Sorry,
I said feeding at night is a necessity. It's good for their blood sugar. It's for weight gain. It keeps them a little bit awake during the night, which we all know is like, could help prevent SIDS. There's so many benefits to feeding at night, and attachment, if you need that like mommy baby attachment, it's really good for that as well. So there's a lot of reasons why you need to feed your newborn at night, but I did not mean to interrupt you.
No, I am so happy you did. I love that you mentioned that. And I think that that's what's so important, is that to take all those things, like we don't have to take a either or approach of like, let's be, right? Or if we don't have to choose either mom or baby. It's like we can find something that really honors both of their needs, and I really, really, like I said, every time I speak to you, I really love that you take those into consideration.
Thank you.
And, yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring you on, because I think that there's a lot of parents on either side of the aisle, so to speak, who are like, no, sleep training is terrible. And then parents who are like, why? I don't see what the issue is.
Right.
People who are like, okay with cry it out. And so I think I just wanted to present the possibility of working with someone like you. If it supports parents, or if it speaks to them, it doesn't have to be, and I think it could be something that works for everyone. So somebody asked a question, which I actually
looking at the questions.
Yeah. I know it's okay. I can mention. I know I saw it before.
Oh,
what does it look like to support your child through their distress? I think I imagine what that looks like, but you can share. Yeah. What does that look like?
Yes. So I would say, depending on your baby's age and their temperament, like, are we dealing with someone who's a little bit more chilled and relaxed and they respond very well to anything that you do? Are they very feisty and stubborn, and no matter what you do, they're just going to scream? So again, we take those things to account as well. But to answer your question more specifically, that can look like sitting next to the crib. Some parents sit on the floor so that they're really eye level. Instead of standing there and looking like this gigantic person hanging over the crib, I actually recommend sometimes going down to the floor, your eye level. They can see you. They don't feel as alone. You can pat it depending on the age, right? You're not going to pat the mattress for a 4-month-old, right? But for a 15-month-old, if you want to mimic or, show as an example of what your baby should be doing, right? Because they're very visual, you can pat the mattress, rub their back a little bit, sing them a song. I always say, if you need to pick them up during the process and you feel that that's what you need to do as a mom, do it. Pick them up, wait until they're nice and calm, put them down. Once you've helped them go from a place of like hysteria to calm, you're safe to put them down, because you've really helped them to calm down. They feel better, they feel more regulated, they feel safe. Put them down and do the process again. And this can take a few times. And I always tell parents, it's okay. It's not supposed to take 1 minute or one try. It's going to take an hour. It could take 2 or 3 nights. But if you do this continuously, I always say, no matter what you do to comfort your child, they get the memo that you're there to support them. They get the memo that, oh, my mom is still here to help me when I'm feeling distressed or frustrated or whatever feeling you want to insert there. And it's just a smoother process. Sometimes it could take a little longer for a very feisty baby. But that being said, if you stick to it, they will get the memo as well, and they will learn to fall asleep on their own. So I hope that answered your question there.
It really does. It actually answers so many of my questions. And again, I just want to say I love how you really honor a parent and what they're like, their body's communicating to them. Like, you're like, if they feel like they need to pick their child up, pick them up. Like, you're not telling parents, don't, all the parenting, all the sleep training things that I've read, you know, used to say things like, you have the urge, don't follow your urge. Don't pick the child up. Don't, you know, and I love that you're really leaning into that and saying, no, it's more about, and also you're not rushing it. It's not like, I think sometimes people are looking for like efficiency, you know, and it's like, no, you're like, we're not going to do that at the expense of you and your child. Like, it's going to take maybe a while. It's going to take a few days. And like, and don't be like discouraged by that. Like, you're like, eventually, I love that. I really, really, really love that. I have to say.
I'm working with 3 babies around the same age, 2 15-month-old babies and 1 17-month-old. And they're all doing a very, very gentle hands-on approach of being in the room. And they're all making progress at their own rate. So one made progress literally in 1 day. And this was the baby that I was like, oh my God, this baby's going to take 3 weeks. Let me prepare myself. Let me prepare the mom, you know? And it was like, they really surprised me. 1 day, maybe a day and a half, like naps were fine. This baby was going down nicely. And then the other baby took a few extra days, and there's just a range. You can't expect, like Blimi said, you can't just be like, you want quick fix, you want right away, let's do this 1 day, and then either give up or just, you know, try a different method. And one thing I always tell parents, which is really important, is when I do my sleep training, I set it in goals. Every 3 days, let's reevaluate and let's make changes. You don't ever want to go into a sleep training method and make changes every single day. It's confusing to the mom. It's confusing to the baby. Let's give it 3 days. Let's see how baby's progressing, and then we can make changes accordingly. And we set goals. And the first goal, the most important thing of all, is that that mom and dad are happy and comfortable with the approach, but more importantly than that is that we make baby happy, comfortable, and confident in their crib. We never want to like just dump them in the crib and be like, this is it, we're sleep training and let's do this. No, we want them to be comfortable. It's part of it. It's part of kids having their own sleep space, having their own room, whatever it is, whether they're in your room. We want their space to be comfortable, and we want them to feel it. Because if you don't have that, you can't sleep train successfully, because that will be very stressful. So that's one thing I did want to mention.
Wow. I really love everything you're saying. Honestly, it sounds like something I could totally get behind with my own child. Like, no, really, I would work with someone like you if I felt like I was really like lost and didn't have. Because I like I said, I really love how you honor a parents where they're at, what they want, and also how you're so supportive of the baby as well. And finding something that can work for everyone, you know. Okay, so I think that you give a really good idea of what it means to support a child through their distress. And like you said, it can look different for different babies. And you mentioned that about like, it depends on the child. I love that you mentioned about temperament, because I know it's different. Sometimes, you know, a sleep approach works, like you said, it's like, so the parent tries it and right away there's minimal crying, and they're like, and then they tell their friend, you should do it too. And then the other friend does it and the child is screaming bloody murder. And so, like, I like that you take that into consideration too. Like, every child is a different temperament, and especially children I know who are the autism spectrum probably would be crying a lot more, probably, I imagine. I don't know for sure.
Interestingly that you say that is the babies, or even like younger children that I've worked with who are like on the spectrum, they don't really like to be touched. So I find that the best way to approach that, because I have moms who are like, even some like, you know, other babies, they also don't love to be patted on the back. It's irritating for some people, you know. It's such a preference, and we have to really tune into what our babies want. Don't just like go pat their back for an hour if they don't like it, or because you think you're making them feel better. So for babies who are on the spectrum also, I find that they actually prefer to be held rather than like patted or shushed. You know, they don't like such stark, you know, movements or noises and stuff. And we really have to respect that. And you may have to leave your baby for 5 minutes without doing anything. You can sit there, but sometimes they actually do so much better than that, with that, excuse me. And actually just maybe singing them a song is way more calming than doing too many stark or harsh movements that would irritate them. So yes, bringing back to the point of like really knowing your baby, you have to know their temperament, and they have preferences just like we do. So that's really, really important for sure.
Wow, I love that. Okay, so I asked you about the youngest age, which you said was around 3-4 months old. And of course you take into consideration feedings and all that, which I love. And then I'm curious, another question, what's the oldest age you do this for?
So I've worked with some 10-year-olds.
Wow.
But usually I find the age, like the oldest age that comes to me is probably, I would say 6 on average. So up to 10, but 6 is really where I find, like, you know, parents will come to me and be like, my 6-year-old is in my bed. Like, how do we deal with this? Because at that point, a lot of it is, you know, behavioral or real habits. I'm sure people even come to you for that kind of stuff, like, you know, because it's really relates more to what you do than what I do, actually. Because at that point, it's not even really sleep training. It's more changing habits and routines and behaviors. And I do deal with that kind of stuff. But for a 6-year-old, yes, 6 is, you know, it's never too late to teach a child or a baby how to sleep. But that's, I would say that's the average oldest age that comes to me.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
And you
Okay,
can make
that's really
changes.
helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was another question, because as somebody mentioned before, like, is my child too old? Like, have they gotten into such bad sleep habits that, like, I can't change anything anymore? So I'm curious.
Yeah, so you can make changes in a lot. So what I do for the older kids is I play a lot of games, because it really is about connecting to your child. I find at that point they're really looking for a connection. Yes, they have a habit. They either wake up at 2 a.m. every night and come to your bed, or they're just used to whatever routine you've gotten them used to. But really at that age, it's about connecting with them, showing them that it's okay to have boundaries and space. And this is my bed, this is your bed, my room, your room, whatever it is. And it's a slow process. It's really a teaching experience more than anything, because you're really teaching them boundaries. You're teaching them that you can still connect with me. I'm still here, but this is my space and this is your space. So I do a lot of games, a lot of visual things with kids that age, and it works really, really well. Some better than others. Some you really have to commit and tell yourself it could take a month. Some 6-year-olds, it could take 6 weeks to really make a full turnaround. And it's okay. As long as the parents know that and they're okay with it, then I'm all in. We can definitely make those changes, but you really have to be hands-on. I get parents who ask me all the time, I'm just going to get a lock for my 6-year-old and lock them in. And I am sure I already know what your response is going to be, but I think that's really traumatic. I think that, I know some kids would be more angry and some would be more traumatized, but whichever it is that they're going to experience, I think it's not the way to do it. There are other ways to teach your child that they have their own room without having to lock them in there. And I always want to tell parents, like, don't do that. Try everything else first before you resort to that. There really is no need. And if you are resorting to that, then we missed something. We missed a step. We missed some important something along the way that we should have done in order not to get to that place, you know? Mm-hmm. And what is that? What is that thing that we're missing? And we have to dig deep at that point.
Yeah, I love that. I'm telling you, I love everything you're saying, because it's it's just so, like, it's such a needs-based approach. Like, you're really taking into consideration where the child is at, and you're like, yeah, and also you're not jumping to things, like you said, that would be the child would experience as cruel. I'm really trying to work, not trying to do quick fixes, and really trying to work to support both the parent and the child in creating a new rhythm, a new routine, a new way of going about sleep. I also just want to throw in here for anybody listening that there's no right or wrong approach when it comes to sleep. Like, if you're okay with your kids coming into your bed every night, then that's fine. Like, I work with parents all the time who think there's something wrong with it. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a matter of whether it works for you or not. If it's really not working for you, then please find something else that works better. You know, go to Sarah and let her help you. But also, I want parents to feel like, if it works for me and I'm fine with the routine that we have and I'm fine with the way that we're doing it. And I know there's families who, like, they all sleep together. They literally have a family bed and it works for them and they're fine. And then the kids, when they get older, want to sleep on their own, just, you know, organically. But again, I know that doesn't work for everybody. I don't have a family bed. You know, it doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't work for everyone, but I want to create space for it to be like, it's not about right or wrong. And like, my children, this is another thing that I have, an issue with, like, the sleep training industry. Like, the messaging that I got for sure when I was, like, had my first, was that something's wrong with me if I can't sleep train my child, or something wrong with my child. Like, that was, you know, and that, I think that people are trying to change that. We're like, no, it's a matter of whether your needs are being met and you're being taken care of. And if they're not, well, let's find something. And I love that you provide that for parents.
Yeah. And you can find an approach that works for every family. Like, I've worked with people from different countries who do have a family bed, and I love it because it's very humbling. And it really teaches me, like, wow, even for me, you can sleep train in a family bed if that works. We're going to create your own space. Sometimes we have to do that on the floor, depending on where we are. I worked with a family from India a few months ago, and it was so eye-opening for me, and I loved every minute of it, because even for me, I know that I'm learning something new every day, and it can work. That's the bottom line. Whatever you decide you're going to do is how we're going to make it work. So when someone says you have to move your baby out, or you have to, you can't co-sleep, or you can't, there's no way to sleep train with co-sleeping, it's just not true. You can. You just have to figure out a way to make it work, like you said, and you can do that. It's just a matter of doing a little bit of digging, a little research, and coming up with something that really makes sense for the parents, which I wanted to tell you, because you mentioned something before about when you were sleep training your child, or the way the sleep training industry promotes sleep training, proper sleep training, is that I always tell parents, one of my number one things is that you have to follow your gut. So even for me, if I give you a sleep plan and you're not comfortable with it, change it, tweak it, make it work for you. Like, I give parents very rigid, detailed schedules, and I always tell them, I write it in bold and I say it boldly, that it's a visual guide, and if it doesn't feel right, go with your gut. There's so much out there telling us what we have to do and what we need to do in order to make it work. But if it doesn't work for you, that's enough cause for me to tell you to just follow your gut. And you should follow your intuition. It's so, so important, especially when it comes to your baby. You know your baby best, and that's the best way to go. So take someone's advice, read a book, get your sleep plan, your parenting advice, whatever it is, and always do what's comfortable for you within that.
I love that message so much.
You have
I'm about that too. It's like, ultimately I can give you guidance, but you know your child best, and please don't ignore what your intuition is telling you, because there's nothing like a mother's intuition. That I see it all the time with parents. Just the other day, actually, I was with a parent and their child was crying, having a nap and crying in the room, and the mother's like, I think I should go, I think he might be stuck or something.
Yeah.
And the father's like, don't go, leave him, he's fine, he's gonna settle down in a few minutes. And she's like, no, I'm gonna go. She went, and she was right. Her baby's foot was actually stuck in the thing. And I was like, see, there's nothing like a mom's intuition. She followed herself. She's like, no, I want to go upstairs and make sure everything's fine, so I'm going. And I really, really love that. I think that I love that you're including that here. And that's what I said. That's why I love the work that you do. And I think that if any parent wants to go a sleep training route, I also love that it's not one size fits all. Yeah. You really, really take into account, every family, their needs, what they want, what they're not. It's not like, well, you're going to have to get your kids out of the room, or you're going to have to, whatever it is. Yeah. You're just working with where they're at.
Yeah, that's true. And I like that point, because even for me, people ask me, well, what do you do? And I'm like, that's a loaded question, because I mean, I'll tell you what I do, but it's not something that you have to do, And I always tell them, this is just what works for me, whatever that is, Yeah. There's a question here I want to answer. What are your goals for newborns? I need to change the topic, but I wanted to answer that.
Sure. Go ahead.
The goal, really, my goal for newborns is, you really want to make sure they're gaining weight weekly. It's really important for newborns in the early weeks. And I think my goals for them are really just to teach them slowly how to start falling asleep on their own. And that does not mean with any crying or cry it out. They're two totally different entities. You basically just give your newborn a little bit of space to be put down. And that also doesn't mean you can't hold your newborn as much as you want. It doesn't mean you can't cuddle with them or feed them or sleep with them or whatever it is that you do in your home. But the goal is really to just give them a little bit of space. And I think it's really important in general, whether it's for a newborn or, an older baby, to give them space to step back, and meaning not respond right away. It sounds really, really bad. I know you're wondering.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah, we need to give them space to see what those needs are. Why are they crying? And that doesn't mean give them space to cry it out. It means give them space to figure out, what does this cry sound like, and what can I learn from it? Are they hungry? Did they have a dirty diaper? Are they tired? Are they overstimulated? And those cries are very different. And if we respond that second to every cry, eventually they all sound the same. And honestly, in the long run, it can even promote more crying, because we're just responding right away. We're not really listening to what our baby needs, and it can kind of go in that direction. So I'm saying that I'm giving you that background because I really think it's important, even for a newborn. Give them a minute or two. Oftentimes they cry in an active state of sleep, and moms will go running and pick them up and start feeding them. And I'm like, wait, but your baby might still be sleeping. So they fuss, they whine, they cry a little bit in their sleep. And it's just important to take a step back to learn how to meet their needs. And I think you can really do that in the newborn stage. And it's also really important for them to have good quality awake time. For me, that's a really big deal. And that just means making sure they get proper sunshine, enough tummy time, stuff to really help them. You don't want to just stick your newborn in a car seat and leave them there all day, or a doona or a stroller. They need to be active. They need to move around. They need sunshine. Those for me are really important tips for newborns. Those are goals. It's too much to get into all of it now, but
For sure.
those are probably some of the most important things. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So no, I hear what you're saying about like if you jump in right away, you might be missing like you're not really tuning into like what's my child communicating, what's going on for them. And you said even with their sleep, I remember that sometimes like my child would she'd be sleeping, but then she would cry, and I would wait, a few moments to listen like to the type of cry exactly to see if it's like is my child needing something, or is it just in the middle of their sleep and they're going right back to sleep, which happened a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess maybe not with new. I don't know. Yeah, but yeah. So you're saying you basically can help parents with starting sort of to get a feel for this.
Yeah, for sure. So that's in short with the newborns. I do a whole program for newborns, but I don't want to get into too much detail about it because we're talking about sleep and sleep training. But I mean, if you have any more questions about it, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah.
There's so much to get into here. I'm like, where do we start? Are we like coming to an end? Like what?
Yeah. So
do you have any more questions for me that you are pressing questions?
Yeah. I have to think if there's anything that comes up for me, but I just want to give you, we're 1:41, so we have about like 15 minutes left.
Okay, sure.
I did see more questions if you wanted to answer people's questions.
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else for me. I think that so far you really, really answered my questions.
Okay.
It's like,
we don't have to go another 15 minutes. I mean, I think we covered a lot. I think that I just want to leave moms with, that it's really important to hold space for your child's feelings during the sleep training process. That's a message I really think it's a good takeaway, is that there's a lot of feelings. Your baby, an older baby might be sad. I can't say a 4-month-old might be as sad. Your 4-month-old might be more frustrated, but the older they get, the more verbal they are, the more, communication you're going to have with them. They could be sad, and it's a great time. Hold space for their feelings, help them through it. It doesn't mean that you should go all in and save the day and not allow them the chance to feel those things. And I think that's one of those things that hinders the sleep training process, is the crying or the lack of understanding why they're crying, right? Mm-hmm. Not knowing how to, help them through their feelings. And I think if we can do that, you can be really successful. You can sleep train, you can be super hands-on, you can be in the room, you can be very supportive, reassuring, empathize as much as you need to or want to as a parent, and you'll get through it. You just have to be consistent. So that's my, my end message here.
Yeah. So it's kind of like what I'm hearing you say is that like the crying, children don't necessarily always have to be rescued from their crying. Of course, if they're communicating a need, we want to meet that need. But the fact that they're crying itself doesn't have to mean like, oh, it's the end of the world or whatever. Again, I really hear you saying we don't want to leave them alone crying for, at least not for a very long time. Like maybe, I don't know. Obviously, you would work with parents on what they feel comfortable with. Like if they're okay with, let's say, a minute, I guess maybe that's something that like that's their, that's their prerogative, and you would work with that. Actually, I'm curious about this. If a parent came to you and said like, well, I'm okay leaving my child crying for, an hour or like even a half hour or even 10 minutes, like by themselves in the room, and I want to do that, what would you do?
So I'll tell you what, there's a few factors to that as well. I always want to start more gentle, but there's factors. It depends on your baby's age. It depends on so many things. Like, are you exclusively breastfeeding? Are you not exclusively breastfeeding? How old is your baby? Are they on solids? Where does your baby sleep? There's so many things that come into play, but I would tell them that I wouldn't go more than a certain amount of time. If you want to go that route and that's your decision, that's totally fine. It works, but make sure that you are listening very closely to the crying. I would say gauge the crying. Make sure that you're not missing anything. Make sure you have your baby monitor set up that you can watch, because I know a lot of books will say, don't watch the baby monitor if you're doing a cry it out, because it'll make you want to run in. But if you are doing a cry it out type of method, or controlled crying, which I like to call it, I think you should be watching the baby monitor, because what if their arm gets stuck? That's the reason we have the baby monitor. What if they throw up? I just had 2 babies throw up the other day, which, their parents were, it was like day number 1, parents were, being super hands-on, patting their back, and they were really upset. And one baby threw up, and it happens. You clean them up, you give them a big hug, you take as much time as you need, you start the next day if you have to, but you know, things like that happen, and you want to make sure you're not missing it, you know? So
Right.
I say, if you are going to go that route, you need to have, you know, don't go more than X amount of time. I think 30 minutes, it depends on the baby, you know what I mean? And also,
Right,
are
how
they
old they
fussing?
Yeah.
Are they shrieking? Are they fussing? Are they whining? It really depends.
Right.
Like, I don't want to just tell anybody, yeah, 30 minutes is fine. Because if your baby is shrieking nonstop for 30 minutes, I think there's something we're missing. But if they're on and off and they're kvetchy and you can tell, like, oh, my baby's really tired, he can't wait to fall asleep, then I would be like, yeah, maybe stay out for a few more minutes. Let's see what he does. You know, so it really depends.
Yeah. Okay, so you basically, yeah, I know, I love that. So you work with a parent and what they want, at the same time really inserting your recommendation of like, I don't think that's safe, or I think that there's something else going on here and we should really look at that. Yeah, I really like that. Like I said, I really like everything that you shared.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Yeah, no, so what I'm hearing you say about the crying before was the point was like, you don't have to necessarily rescue your children from crying every single time. And if you can tolerate the distress and just be there as a supportive presence, then that can, like you said, then eventually that can support them in falling asleep on their own.
Yes, and the thing that I really like about being hands-on is that it actually eliminates more crying like during the process, meaning when we get to a point in the process where we have to start scaling back on how much we're giving that child, or when we get to a point where, let's say we hit a wall, we've made progress and now we've hit a wall. So now your baby's relying on you to do X, Y, and Z to get him to fall asleep. Now we start scaling back. Now we start weaning them off of that. And it's much easier to do that because you've already prepped them. You've given them a few days to get used to this routine. You've already met the goal that we set out, that now your baby's happy, comfortable, and confident in their bed. And that's half the crying right there, right? Because if you put a baby down who's not confident, not comfortable, not feeling secure, the crying is going to be like insurmountable, you know? But when we prep them and we get them to a place where now we're on day 3 or 4 and now we have to make a change to meet the next goal, the crying is usually 9 out of 10 times much less because of that preparation. So that's the best way to answer that question or comment.
Yeah, so like I said, you basically work slowly towards a goal. You're not going to do quick fixes. You really, like you said, you set goals for like 3 days at a time, see where that takes you, and then reevaluate and sort of, and I love that. I really love it, I think mostly because I think so many different parents can come to you because you're not a one size fits all. You're not going to like shove down things down a parent's throat. You're literally there to support parents in whatever feels right for them. And you're like, I'm going to meet you there and I'm going to support you in finding something that works best for you and your baby.
Yes, definitely. That's 100%. Yeah. I had a mom who came to me and who was like, I read every book and, you know, they say never take your baby out before 6 a.m. 6 a.m. is morning time and that's it. And her baby was like a 10-hour a night sleeper. He was never sleeping past 5 a.m. And I said to her, does it bother you that he's waking up at 5? Can you deal with that? And she's, oh, I would love it. I would love to take him out at 5. I'm an early riser. He wakes up at 5 every day. I've tried for months to get him on this 6 a.m. schedule. And I said, if it doesn't bother you and 5 a.m. works for you, then that's the start of your day. Would I recommend going earlier than that? Probably not, for a lot of reasons. You don't want to have a 5 a.m. nap and then, you know, 4 p.m. bedtime. But like, I'm an early riser. I get it. I'm up at like the crack of dawn every day. So, and I have 2 early risers, you know, so they have their stoplight clocks. Thank God they stay in their room, they entertain each other, but they're not alone, they're fine. But if 5 a.m. works for you, again, this is where your intuition kicks in. If you have a 10-hour sleeper, take your baby out at 5 a.m. I mean, see first if you can get them to sleep a little later. And if not, you've done your part, you've tried everything, then start your day at 5 if it doesn't bother you, if it works for you. So there's no hard, fast rules that tell you like you have to do this or you can't do that, and then you're stuck because you didn't meet that criteria, and then now you feel like a failure because it didn't work for you. It could work for you. We just have to make it work for your schedule and for your, you know, your parenting style and whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think that's what parents are looking for. Like for somebody else to like shove their ideas down their throat and to say like, this is how you need to do it. And it's like, exactly. Like it's really not meeting the parent and child where they're at. Like clearly she's fine with a child waking
Yep,
at 5 and the child is fine with that too.
it
Like
works
then
for
that's
her.
fine for everyone. Yeah. Why are we creating an issue out of something that isn't? Exactly. So
Yeah.
I think it is really helpful when parents are met where they're at. Parents and babies, I should say,
Yeah.
because I think that you're really trying to consider both.
Yeah,
And
for
yeah,
sure. Yeah, you
yeah,
definitely need to consider both for sure.
yeah, because they're both in the equation here, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, honestly, I really believe that when a parent cares for their child in the way that they feels right for them, it's also better for the parent. Meaning, if a parent, like you said, you know, a parent feels like they want to comfort their child in a certain way and they're holding themselves back from doing that, I think that it's also affects the parents like mental or emotional health in some way.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, because the parents feel like they're doing something their body is telling them to do, their heart and their mind. So that is setting them up for success.
Right.
And to do the opposite would set them up for failure, which is why I feel so many parents quit, because they either didn't get the method that was right for them, they got a one-size-fits-all method, or they were told to do something that goes against what their intuition is telling them, and then it doesn't work, you know,
Right.
which is
Exactly.
a shame, because it could work really, really nicely. So yeah, again, you definitely have to follow your gut, do what works for you, tweak it to make it work for you, and there's a few ways to go about it. So hopefully you've taken something from this, and I've answered all or most of your pressing questions.
Yeah. You definitely have for me, and I noticed some of the questions coming in, and it seems
Yeah.
like you really have. I think people are mostly nervous about like if it's too late, if I haven't done certain habits until this point, and it seems like you're like at any age that would work, it could be fine. And
Yeah.
I think that I think that it's so helpful. I know people reach out to me and will say like I co-sleep with my child, but like it's really hard on me, and like I just don't know if there's any other. I recently had a parent, and I just don't know if there's. And I said, maybe there's a sleep training approach that could work, like that's responsive, that work.
Yeah,
and she's like, well, I've never heard of that before. I don't think there's such a thing. I don't think that could work. And I was like, no, I really think that there are coaches out there who really would work with you and who would, you know, do things that only you're comfortable with and could help you a little bit more with this. And so I'm just so happy that, you know, people can see that there is something like that out there for wherever you know, for wherever they're at.
So just to answer that question, actually, I do believe that the reason why the sleep training industry is so against co-sleeping for the most part is because it's a little bit more difficult to accomplish what they want you to accomplish, but they're not looking at what you want to accomplish, right? So yes, there is some value in saying that moving your child to their own room and their own bed, it's going to be easier and quicker. But does it have to be easier and quicker? That's the real question that you need to look at, because why are they telling you that you can't co-sleep and sleep train? Is it because it's easier for the sleep trainer, or is it easier for the baby? And I don't co-sleep. I never really have. But if somebody comes to me, I want to know what they want. And I always ask them, what do you want out of this session or out of our work together? What do you want to accomplish? Do you want the baby out of your room, or do you want the baby sleeping comfortably in your room? And maybe we can structure those nighttime feedings so they're not erratic and all of it. And if mom tells me that she wants to co-sleep, that's what we're going to do. So I think at the end of the day, it boils down to it just being easier for the sleep trainer and the process. It goes quicker for us to tell you, put your baby in their own room and just do whatever it is. So that's something that I noticed. And yes, you can definitely co-sleep. Yes, it is easier to do it when they're not in your room, but are you looking for easier? Or are you looking to accomplish something that you were told you just can't do?
I love that. I love that distinction of like, yes, it might be easier and faster, but like, you're like, what parents are looking for. They're fine to take slower and not as easy, as long as like it's in alignment with what their values or what's important to them. Or I really, really, really love that. And like I said, I keep saying it 100 times because I think you're the first person I've ever met who, or maybe the second, who does sleep training, but is so responsive and also is so like, works with parents, so like respectful of parents and babies and where everyone's at, and really working with them instead of just like shoving down your one size fits all method down everybody's throats, you know?
I used to be much more rigid in my approaches until I actually worked with people who had a family that were in other countries and had cultures who thought I was insane, you know, and they thought I was the one who was weird for like, why would you move your baby out of your room? That's so unnatural. That's so abnormal. So I love it because it was so eye-opening for me. I've made so many like acquaintances and friends, and it helps me help other people, because I definitely was very like more one-track minded when it came to this. No, you move your baby out, you do this method, this is what works, and then it just you realize, instead of me saying, oh, it's not going to work for that family. No, I have to make it work for that family, and that's the puzzle that I like to have. I like to have that challenge. I like the challenge of being able to help a family who told me, I worked with so many sleep trainers and it didn't work. I'm like, okay, we're going to do this. I'm going to help you figure it out. You know, this is my challenge. But yeah,
I love that. I love that you said that, when that's your challenge. And I also really relate to like being much more like one track minded and rigid, and then working with people, becoming much more open-minded and realizing like, wait, maybe we can meet them where they're at more. Maybe there's a few different ways of going about this. I had that experience too as a parenting coach. So I really relate to that. And I think that's like the growth and evolvement that we go through working, right? Like in our work.
Yeah, I'm sure. And if you can't take every experience or profession or whatever it is that you do as a learning experience, and you just, you know, you remain static, you don't grow, and you're limited in what you can offer people, and you're not so relatable. So you have to put yourself out there and in other people's shoes, and the experiences are very eye-opening. I'm really grateful for them, because I'm very humbled by the people that I work with and the experiences that I've had. So that's for sure.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for being on here and for sharing everything that you did. I honestly believe that this will be helpful to so many parents who don't know that there's other options out there, that it's possible to find something that meets them where they're at, that what they're comfortable with, but it's still like will take care of their need for sleep and their child's need for sleep and whatever it is that they're looking for. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to share this with all of us. So tell everybody, people who are not on Instagram will see this as well, because I'm putting it on YouTube.
Okay.
So how could they, I know people on Instagram know they can reach you at your handle, because it's going to be here, A Little Sleep. I'm going to tag you.
Yeah.
But people who aren't, how can they reach out to you if they want some support and they want your help?
They can reach me. I mean, I have my phone number. They can go to my website. It's www.alittlesleep.com. They can reach me there at my phone number. I can give you my information, and that's the best way.
I can put it under the video.
Sure. Yeah, it's my WhatsApp and my my website are the best ways.
Your website is helpful. Yeah, so alittlesleep.com.
Yes, literally www.alittlesleep.com.
Perfect. Amazing.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This was so fun. I loved it, and I always love talking about sleep. We can talk about it for hours. So.
I love it. I think those are the people who are like at best at what they do. I also love talking about parenting, and I can like talk like ad nauseum. And so I just love that, because I think that like you can tell, and it makes a difference with how you do your work and show up for the families that you support. So
yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right,
I really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone who was here and for your questions.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.